most of the questions were already answered in the talks, I think. We had some that were being asked that were answered right away. But we've got a few questions, and folks can ask more questions in the Slack channel. Caitlin has a thread where you can reply directly to ask questions, and she'll make sure it gets in our doc. Or you could tag her at Caitlin. I'm not sure exactly what her handle is, but if you've got a question you'd like us to ask, then we can post it here. All right. Well, let's get started, shall we? Any opening remarks? Jason, why don't you go ahead? I know you have a speech prepared.
I'd like to thank Jeff and Victor, and great talks, everyone.
All right. And Manfred, sorry about the package, but that's the thought that counts. I appreciate it.
No worries, that can happen. Well, it's kind of a sacrilege, isn't it? But we will fix it. I will send you another one.
Okay.
I just want to throw in there that I am still at my same address, and there won't be anybody's here to confiscate the nice box of chocolates and soda. So I'm just saying, I'm here for you.
That's true. I've got pigs who sleep right in proximity to my front porch. So if it gets there before I'm home, they might go crazy all day, smelling that chocolate.
Yep.
But all right, so we've got a few questions, a lot of micro front end questions, not surprisingly. One is particular to NX and plans to provide similar generators for React for MFE host and MFE remote. I don't know if anyone on this call has insight into that may be more. Manfred, I don't know if that's on your radar. I know your focus is primarily Angular.
Yeah. I mean, I like React, but I don't use it, so yeah, I cannot say much about this.
As far as I know, like we have discussed this internally, like to extend this also to the NX React generators, but there's nothing like we didn't start developing that yet. But I think it totally makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And is it Column working on that? Did I see someone say?
Yeah, Column was one of the engineers on the core team that worked on the module federation on our side. So kind of integrating Manfred's work into the Narwhal Angular package. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this one you may know the answer to, Manfred or Brandon. Do we know if module federation intends to support server-side rendering for micro front ends?
Yeah, it's possible. The good thing is that module federation runs inside of Webpack, and hence we can also use it to produce server-side code. We need to configure it the right way. And if you look into my plugin, that also works nicely together with Nx, you will find a schematic for this. If it detects that you have server-side rendering, then it will generate the right boilerplate to make it work.
Cool.
Perhaps one word of caution. Meanwhile, in the Angular world, we have two APIs for server-side rendering. The newer one and the older one. And this has been implemented as schematic for the newer one. So if someone is using the older one, then we need to find how
the package of the, or what are they called, the older one and newer one?
I always confuse them, but if you look up my README in my plugin, then you will find out what's the newer one, the one that's supported by it.
And how much do we have to pay to get access to your README?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's like server-old and server-new or something like that. Right?
Yeah, it's not that obvious, unfortunately.
Just imagining the meeting where they came up with that and how much they had to argue to just name it old and new and be done with it. Okay.
Yep.
So someone asked, do we have any alternative solution for scaling apps? Because micro frontends is a little complicated at first, and I don't have any more context than that. So scaling the app, I'm not sure if it means like scaling the like development to have more team autonomy or what. But any thoughts? This
think
could be Manfred or anyone who has ideas.
Yeah, I think incremental builds might be an answer here. If you're looking to scale your build times and get them lower for a large app, then you can look there. Because like micro front ends is really a portion of incremental build. You have to build your whole application incrementally for it to be an MFE. But it can save you some overhead for deploying it if you don't want to worry about deploying different applications.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the MFEs, in terms of scaling your team development, the only thing they really, I mean, they make it where you can deploy independently most of the time or a lot of the time, and so if that's a scaling challenge for you, like coordinating deploys, then they can be good for that. You need to figure out the right way to do it to support that, but
I think like as in general also, like if you, what I also find quite interesting, and I know that we did that for a client as well, is kind of if you're not 100% sure, and kind of Manfred also mentioned that, right? Like if you're not 100% sure that micro frontends is what you want to aiming towards, like what you're aiming for, then you can also just like start with the plain Nx setup, right? So for instance, in Angular with lazy loading and proper separating into libs and stuff, you can already go like a very long way, right? And then switch over when you really see, okay, now is the need. And we did that with the client, and that worked pretty seamlessly, like in the end. So you can just go ahead, develop, start deploying, actually without worrying too much about the whole architecture setup in general, right? Just make sure you separate them properly, structure them in libs, and then at some point you're kind of ready for actually going the micro frontend route, and then you can switch over, right?
Yeah, that's in general a good idea. Start lean, start with a simple solution, but make sure you can refactor it afterwards if you really need it. If you find out that the cost of micro frontends are worth it in your very case. And for this, using constraints between libraries, something that Nx is supporting since its first days, is really valuable, because if you don't use other libraries of other business domains, then refactoring it later to individual deployable micro frontends is not that difficult. Of course, if everything is intermingled with each other, refactoring it later to micro frontends is really a pain.
Mm-hmm. That brings up another good question of, Manfred, I'm interested in your experience. Have you seen cases where people bought into micro frontends and regretted it, or like it wasn't the right solution for what they were trying to accomplish? I know we've seen some of that, but I'm curious what you've seen.
That happens sometimes, unfortunately.
Like what are things people try to use them for, and it's maybe not the right fit for?
Yeah, because perhaps there is only a team of 3 or 4 developers, and then going with micro frontends is very likely an overhead. It brings more effort than gain. But I'm really an early adopter for micro frontends, but nevertheless, I'm not recommending it to everyone. Sometimes I'm saying, or I would say most of the times I'm saying, this is not what you need here. Try a leaner solution. But if you really need it, then it can solve pains. Hopefully it solves more pains than it causes.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a place for it. And it can solve some interesting problems.
Yeah, I know, at least from working on different projects, I know Jason has done this like both ways. I think they done using the pre-module federation, or like I call it hand rolled module federation. And can you want to talk about the difference of the two, or maybe something, slight differences between how you handle those?
I would say like there's not actually much of a difference. I think before module federation, you would have to do some more things like figure out where your bundles are, maybe like keep a manifest of where different bundles are brought in. And that's really what Webpack is doing under the hood. It's storing like where your bundles are and like simplifying how you import them. So I think that particular part of it is going to be like the area where module federation changes the most. And it's a really easy area to change in my experience anyways. But the nice thing about starting that, or the hard thing about starting that way is that it takes a long time to get ramped up. So going with like a normal setup is going to get you up and going way faster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
definitely.
that's another good question of like what are some good patterns of how you organize your workspace to make it possible to do micro front ends or make it easier, I guess, down the road.
In the cases that I worked on, I think it was very essential to have like workspace generators where you can generate like a new application. And like when you generate that, it'll also generate like certain tags, which will say that, hey, this is like a main feature of the like overall application. And then you can generate regular libraries under that, but having that consistent like just different parts of the application is going to automatically define what you define later as a micro front end. I think that's a good practice in general, even if you don't have any intentions of going for micro front ends. So I would recommend that anyways.
Yeah.
But creating those different zones and then enforcing that those different scopes don't depend on each other for the most part is important.
Yeah, I think that's a good. Go ahead. Okay, I was gonna say I think that's a good. Talking about generators, custom generators. I think that's a good area to maximize what's in your workspace. Also, question for Juri: like, what are some of the interesting generators or that you've seen in practice as far as maybe migrations or just kind of standardizing on the setup or some things that you've seen there?
Yeah, Jason kind of took this already, kind of answered this already. The most common one is definitely kind of just like even wrapping existing generators together, right? As Jason mentioned, right? Like if you have like, and that's for sure that once you kind of grow your NX workspace, you will have a very specific way of setting up applications, right? You might always kind of import certain libraries or generate them like already with the lips that are part of that specific application, right? And so rather than having people to kind of do that repetitively, right? Or what the usual way is like have some README somewhere like hidden in the repository, which like has the steps to do it, right? Just wrap it in a generator, right? So that's the easiest way to go. And those generators are also pretty easy to create, right? It's like what you do is simply just invoke different other functions that are also generators, right? And compose them together. Maybe like in the end, change a couple files and you're already done, right? So that's definitely one of the most common ones and also most useful ones.
Okay, I like how we're having a serious conversation about generators, and Jeff is trying to figure out how am I going to pour as much of this coffee into my cup.
Somebody was or a few people were asking in the Slack about it. This is a Starbucks coffee thing that Carol Prisbitek graciously brought in today, Narwhal's Director of Operations.
I like it. I've seen wine in a box, but I haven't seen coffee in a box before like that. So
now you have.
Shout out to Starbucks for who's not sponsoring this conference.
What gives Starbucks?
Coffee at scale, as they say. We're all about the scale, and they're scaling up the coffee boxes.
Yeah, this is just for me, by the way.
Okay, scaling up coffee for Jeff is where we're at now.
We got a few minutes left. We're about 5 minutes left. Jason, to your topic. So you've worked with different sizes of companies, and you've worked with a lot of big enterprises and a lot of small companies using NX. What do you see as different in the way they use NX? Like a large team with hundreds of developers versus a team just getting started, or maybe a startup team. What are the different dynamics?
I don't think there is much. I think like all companies are different and they work in different ways. So that is the major contributor to differences in how they work. Perhaps like smaller organizations are way more eager to get in earlier in the monorepo, whereas with like a larger corporation trying to migrate code in, they're a little bit more hesitant and they want to get more standards in place before they do so. But once everyone's in, I think it becomes pretty much the same. I think some of the things that I've seen being successful across all sizes is that having like a meeting, maybe like bi-weekly or something, that you can say like, hey, we're just going to discuss like best practices in the repo, and then so that everyone maybe like leads from each team or in sync with the best practices. So I would actually say there's not much difference once they get going. I would say for smaller organizations, they're able to achieve the same workflow that a larger organization is able to achieve, which is a benefit here.
Cool. You touched on things like tags and scopes earlier. I think that was you. What things do you think would make sense to focus on early on with creating a system of tags and enforcing boundaries between products? Or like, what's over engineering and what's reasonable to focus on when you're not a massive org moving into a monorepo? Maybe you're a fresh workspace.
That's honestly the first thing that I do. Because like, I guess the real first thing is to create a generator, a workspace generator, to make it easy to generate things with tags. But then also behind the scenes, also like creating a practice for using tags for projects, and then enforcing module boundaries. I think scope tags matter a lot. Less so like type tags, but like scope tags, being able to say that like one part of the organization cannot depend on another part of the organization is important for keeping them all separate.
Yeah.
So those two things kind of in tandem are the places where I like to start with most projects. And I think that's something that most people don't actually do because they want to get in and write features. But yeah, I would recommend taking a look at this.
But what's the best place in our docs for people to learn more about tagging? I know we've got something in our one of our courses on nxplaybook.com. Brandon, do we have good patterns? I know we've also got our enterprise React monorepo something or other book and enterprise Angular monorepo patterns book that go into a lot of detail on this.
Yeah, we have somewhere. Yeah, we still have those books available for download for the Enterprise React and Enterprise Angular. And we do have some pages in our docs that talk about using tags and constraints to get more value out of that. So yeah, we definitely been working. I'll just say we've been doing a lot of work on the docs, trying to clean up the organization there and making things easier to find. So that would be the first place to start. I would say if you're going to the docs, just kind of look down the left side there. Or you can even use our fancy search because that's there too.
Yeah,
and just search for tags there, and you'll should get something.
It's a cool feature. Yeah, I discovered it the other day.
Shout out to Ben Cabanez. Maybe other people worked on that as well, but I know he's been working a lot on the UX and UI of the docs.
Yeah, shout out to shout out to Ben, who's been grinding on making sure that it's SEO friendly and search friendly and everything else, and the rest of the team also contributing docs and guides and making them look nice and clean. So,
so we've only got less than a minute left. There was one more question that came in of that maybe Juri or Jason have a good answer to. Any plans to enable running plugins within an existing workspace without having to build them first?
Well, we actually kind of discussed this. Like when I set up like the talk, we figured like it might definitely be possible, right, to discover those like workspace specific plugins, right? Which you're not, because like the plugin setup right now is kind of intended, okay, you create it and then you kind of publish it somewhere, right? And you share it like with your own NX workspace or with the community. But this would definitely be something we could improve and such that like they become more like your workspace generators and workspace executors, right? So yeah, definitely have a look or like watch out on our releases that come up, because like that might be something that we're improving.
Cool. All right, well, that's our time. Thank you so much for our speakers and panelists. And I think now, are we going to do a break? Lunch break?
Yes. Yeah, we'll go dinner
break.
Yes, I think it is time for a break. We had to start a few minutes afterwards so I could get myself together, and then we're working through some of the other things. So yeah, thanks Jason, Manfred, and Juri, and